This week, we'll learn how researching a lizard indigenous to the US Southwest led to the development of Ozempic. But first, a federal judge has just ruled that hundreds of National Institute of Health grant terminations are void and illegal. My name is Alex Hogan, and I'm the senior multimedia producer at STAT, and this is the second installment of a new weekly video series. Since the beginning of the second Trump administration, billions of dollars of federal grants funding medical research have been canceled. The NIH is the biggest funder of biomedical research in the US. The sudden termination of billions of dollars worth of grants has been devastating to the country's scientific community. Recently, 2 lawsuits were brought before a US District Court in Boston, and the judge sided with the plaintiffs in the case. Lawyers for the American Public Health Association, one of the plaintiffs, argued that the grant terminations were arbitrary and capricious, and violated a 1946 law that governs how federal agencies can make changes to policies, called the Administrative Procedure Act. Many of the NIH grants were terminated because the Trump administration considered them to be funding DEI topics, including research into LGBTQ+ populations. During the hearing, Judge William Young, appointed by Ronald Reagan, pressed the government to define what the NIH considered DEI, but their lawyers offered no formal definition used for making the cuts. This week's decision comes as a relief, although possibly a temporary one, to many US researchers whose work has been deeply disrupted by the funding cuts. The decision could be appealed. This legal battle over funding cuts reminded me of a moment from when my colleague Allison DeAngelis interviewed Reed Jobs on stage at last month's Stat Breakthrough West Summit in San Francisco. Reed Jobs is the founder of Yosemite, a venture fund that invests in companies that research and treat cancer. He founded the company in part because of his experience seeing his dad, Apple founder Steve Jobs, battle pancreatic cancer. Supporters of budget cuts like to point out funds being wasted on trivial science. And while it's true that not every research project turns out to be a good investment of taxpayer money, some remarkable advances in medicine have been made because a government-funded researcher went down an obscure rabbit hole and discovered something amazing. Allison spoke with Jobs soon after massive cuts to US scientific research had been announced. He used the example of how research into Gila monsters, something seemingly unrelated to human health, led to a world-changing discovery. Let's take a look.
Studying the Gila monster metabolism, which is a poisonous lizard from Arizona, it's pretty obscure, in the 1980s, and studying how it eats about 2 meals a year. How does it survive? Well, it slows down its metabolism through what became GLP-1 agonists. The foundational research there was obviously nothing that had a prayer of any kind of commercialization, and has now created an entirely new class of drugs, which are now the best-selling drugs in the world, about 25 years later. And it's the time element that's the most important there, because there were some amazing biologists who did this, who were basically like zoologists, frankly, who started this. And of course, this wasn't with any idea about commercialization. This was just for the pure scientific discovery. Obviously, this is how discovery works. That is what is going to be really getting cut here. And as someone who invests in cutting-edge research, I am terrified for what this means, maybe not this year, but in 5 years and 10 years.
Allison, like I told you after the Breakthrough West Summit, this panel with Reed Jobs was one of my favorite ever at any STAT event we've ever had. And shameless plug here, we'll be having our flagship summit in Boston in October. I'll put the details in the description. For more coverage on health, science, policy, maybe Gila monsters, please subscribe to our channel. We'll be back next week, same STAT time, same STAT channel.